All right. We got Connor Martin with us again on Live in Fort Collins, our weekly live show that we do Mondays at 12 p.m. noon. Talks about things that are happening in Fort Collins, things that have happened, things that you can do, really just kind of staying up to date with what's going on in Fort Collins. And last week we dove in to a lot of different areas. This week we're going to talk about a little bit of some city salaries that was going on at the city of Fort Collins for their 3 employees. So we have a manager council type governance that essentially our city council has 3 direct employees: city manager, city chief judge, and city attorney, that they need to set some salaries for, which some of these numbers are pretty large. But we'll also talk about things that are happening and happened in Fort Collins over the past week. Connor, what are your thoughts on unions in employment?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question on that side. Unions, I think, play a really good part in certain jobs and aspects on that side. I think that at certain points it can be a bear as well, too, on that side to deal with unions as a privatized owner. As a city group, I think it's probably a little bit more meshed in, a little bit better to work with on that side. I've seen through construction companies and other industries out there where it works decent with, but then one of the biggest things that I see, and my dad's been part of construction for his whole entire life on that side. He's dealt with a lot of unions on that side as well. And one of the things coming from his perspective and just from watching that and stuff is a lot of people end up seeing where these guys who work for privatized companies that are non-union are out there working hard. They get their 1 or 2 breaks a day and stuff like that. And then they go out and work with someone, on a DIA project, for example. They went out and did some work with a union group out there. And one of the things that their employees always saw, at least wise, was the fact that, unions have a lot more flexibility with breaks and time off and, more benefits for the actual individual. But when it comes to actually getting work done, when you work with a union, in my opinion, it tends to take a little bit longer time because, you'd have a group of guys out there working on construction. They'd be working a lot, 12-hour days. Unions have a little less time on that side. They also get multiple breaks. And so it seems, at least in the construction world, it can be a little bit seem unfair to a certain regard because you got these other guys out there working as hard as they possibly can. And you got these other guys taking breaks every, couple hours for 20 to 30 minutes for their smoke breaks or just to relax and stuff. So in certain regards, I think they're great, but in other regards, I think they can make projects take a lot longer, can make things a little bit more expensive for individuals. But I believe the protection that it does bring to individuals inside that union is well worth it. And it just depends on if you're willing to go through the bureaucracy of dealing with unions. I think that's where I don't have any expertise in it. I've always worked in the private industry and fields. And so I'm not sure how well it works out overall, but for city purposes, I think it's something that's well worth it, just because there's a lot of niches, a lot of groups and stuff. So being able to have your own group to rely on and depend on when it comes to negotiating and going through contracts and making sure that work is fair and reasonable, I think unions do play a really important factor on that.
Okay. Well, the reason I ask is because so there was public comment going on at a city council meeting, and it was about an hour long, but about half of them, probably more than half, 3/4 of the individuals that were talking in public comment were talking in regards to Fort Collins Connections, which, if you're watching this, Fort Collins Connections is our municipal broadband. It's a city utility now. It's very affordable gigabyte speed internet. But over the last, and it's kind of been in place really going since about 2020, maybe 2021. And that was a remote work time period. And recently, city manager and City of Fort Collins is requiring, I should say, that there is a certain amount of days per week that they would like to see the connection members and employees come in to the office versus remote work. And a lot of these people are, not excited about that. And so they took up their right to try to form a union that was then basically disregarded or not recognized, is kind of how I perceived it from the city of Fort Collins and the city manager. And I think what they were portraying was that they're not disregarding it yet. They're doing their fact finding, their due diligence. But on the flip side, in the same city council meeting, they were discussing with the fraternity of police. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but essentially discussing the collective bargaining agreement with the police department for the 25 to 27 agreement, 3-year agreement for pay, retirement, all that kind of stuff. And the city was negotiating directly with that union. So it felt like there was a little bit of a disconnect, and I don't have near enough information for all of that. Now I can say it sounds like the majority of the frustrations is coming from the remote work requirement to come back into the office. And I mean, we work pretty much remotely doing what we do, buying and selling houses for others. We have an office that we come in and hang out every now and again. I know a lot of people have relocated over the last 4 years all over the country because of the remote work ability. And I don't see why the city of Fort Collins is forcing that as far as coming back into the office. But I know that's kind of the path that a lot of companies are moving forward right now is trying to get people back to the office.
I mean, to me, it's a double-edged sword on that side. Like, I completely understand and completely think that, being able to work remotely, saves a lot on the individual, just cost-wise, going into the office, spending time there. And, for most individuals, I mean, we have a set, checklist of what we got going. I mean, between me and you, I know I've seen your list of your checklist that you got to go through every day. And your goal is to hit 80 to 90% of that if you can on that side. And that's the same for me. And I think that's how a lot of remote workers are also on that side, where they got a checklist. Once they get that checklist done, they can continue to work more and more on that side. But like you said, when you go into the office, I've seen it in offices that I've worked for before, where a lot of that time is there could be a lot of downtime to it. There's a lot of talking in between individuals, which I think is a positive thing. It's good to have camaraderie and community in that way. So I think that's a positive. And I know that they're big corporations, and I wish I could remember the video I was watching just this weekend on that side, but it was a big, Forbes, 500 company that was out there. And what they ended up doing is that there's been some technology that's been put in recently for individuals who work on their computer remotely, and it allows you to stay logged in. I mean, my dad used to work for a company remotely from Kansas, and one of the things that he could do is you sign in the morning at 6 a.m., you do a little bit of work, you do your basic emails for the morning time, and then all of a sudden you could go out and you could be making your coffee, making your lunch upstairs, XYZ, and some of that stuff. So I think some of these companies are starting to realize like how much time is actually being put to work versus how much time is being put to personal use during work hours. And I know that's been a problem for corporations, wondering if they can squeeze out more from people is kind of my thoughts. And that's why they want to bring individuals back into the office so that they can try and bring more individuals in and have, a true 40-hour work week versus other people doing their errands and other things while they're working. And so I know that's something that has been talked about, like in big corporations, where they had a device where it would move and manipulate your mouse so that it would always show that, hey, you're on the computer screwing around or doing something within the programs. But in reality, it was someone who bought a clicker that was able to move itself, and then they could head out. But
I don't know. I mean, there was a comment, I think remote work is here to stay. Hybrid is a middle ground for a lot of companies. And I agree. Like, I feel like it'll be difficult for those, because I know there were some folks that worked like at Madwire, for instance, here in town, that moved to Hawaii. And Madwire invested, and it's not the employee's responsibility to care about this, but they leased this building for like 20 years and put like a couple $1 million into the renovation. And that parking lot, if you ever drive by that parking lot, it is always vacant. I mean, like no cars there for how much space they have, which is wild. And I agree. I think the remote work here, you can't take it all away. And I think
exactly
the middle ground. It'll be interesting to see how the connections and the city navigate this, because it is a very important utility now for a lot of Fort Collins. And I just yesterday got home from the cabin and looked at my phone, and the internet wasn't working very good. So I did the old unplug, plug in, and worked great. So it was, but it made me like, I'm like, man, if this internet goes down, and a lot of the customer service with connections. So, I think it's kind of inning one with connections in Fort Collins as far as how, if they, agree to the union, unionizing or not. But let's see here, a couple other comments. Trust me, being in the office doesn't mean automatic productivity. Agreed. So much time can be wasted in the office. Sure, totally. And actually, there's a lot of studies out there that maybe not studies, but maybe anecdotally, of people talking about they're putting in a lot more than 40 hours when they're remote working, because they're checking their emails at night. They're like, all right, I got to put my kids to bed at 5 to 6:30, or maybe feed them. And so I'm going to have to work from 7 to 9. And so I think there is that this kind of like ever attachment to work that people could very well be putting in more than that. Remote work is a valuable perk. Taking away that perk would have to come with an incentive of some kind. I have a few coworkers who will outright quit if remote was taken away. Totally.
Oh yeah.
Which actually we talk a lot too on this channel about, relocation. A lot of people are able to relocate to Fort Collins, Northern Colorado, and knowing what some other economic opportunities might be in the event that you have to quit your job or get laid off or whatever, because you're taking a big risk. Like, let's say you come in from Houston, where there's Fortune 500 companies all over the place, and if you got laid off from one, you could probably go next door, knock on it, and get a job opportunity. That's not the same here, and in different areas and locations. If you move there and got laid off for opportunities, you're going to have to go straight to LinkedIn and find these remote work opportunities that are geo. It just doesn't matter where you are in the world. So it'll be interesting to watch it. I am in full agreement that I don't really care where you are or what you're doing, as long as you get your work done. With our assistants, Izzy, and now Elizabeth and Katrina, it's just like, dude, I don't care. Like, I don't. You could tell me you're working 60 hours and I would believe it, or you could tell me you're working 5 hours and I'd believe it. And it doesn't matter to me, because there's essentially a task-oriented system that we care about. But maybe there's some different reasons for being in person versus not, and the collaboration, all that kind of stuff. So I think we're inning one of the connections union. But moving forward, Fort Collins is buying. They've agreed to buy the Alberton's location out there on North College. I know you spend some time out in that area, Connor, kind of heading up 287, and you see that kind of blight of a property, so to speak, that's been vacant for decades. Like, I don't know how long it has been empty, but it's been empty for a long ass time. City of Fort Collins bought it for $7.64 million. And some possibilities of uses out there are a community hub, library, affordable housing, workforce development center, or recreation and entertainment space. So, it looks like that space will be soon developed into something. I think that North College corridor is really, they've got a lot of good things going for it. They've got a lot of challenging things going for it. And like the homeless shelter that's been approved, it's going to get built there. Albertsons, that is on the pro side of things. It's like they're going to have now a $7.64 million asset that I'm sure they're going to pump in another few $1 million on whatever they're going to renovate it into. That will now be an activity type space. So, and then all the development and building along Suniga. But what are your thoughts on what does Fort Collins, what does North Fort Collins need out there based off of some of those options of a community hub, workforce development, affordable housing, recreation area? What would you like to see out there?
For me on that side, I mean, I would really like to see, being that, I mean, the north side of Fort Collins, definitely housing is a big issue out there. I think that's obviously something we need more of on that side. I know that on that northeast side of Fort Collins, that's where a lot of our new developments are going into as well on that side. And so I think, one, obviously having the King Soapers over there is fantastic. So that's a good deal having that. You have some of the basics as well, from oil changes to tire rotations, some of the basic things that we need that are 5 to 7 minutes away from most homes in that area. But I think the one thing that is really lacking compared to the like Southern Fort Collins and that area is having other shopping than just grocery stores. You know, they have a Jack's over there, so you know there's that, but also having some other little small boutique shops, having, you know, some probably a gym over in that side. I'm not really familiar with any gyms on the north side. And so
Yeah,
everybody,
Aslan's
okay, gotcha. And so,
not,
yeah, I
not
think
really. I
it's a small gym on that side, small equipment and everything. So having a gym, having, you know, family recreation out there as well, I think is really important. I think that's also another big section that's being missed, as well as just having a place to go. Downtown Fort Collins is great, but it's really only there for shopping. So if you're wanting to go over and do anything fun with the family, you're going to have to head out west, or you're going to have to head far south just to go find anything that's really enjoyable. You have Fort Fun off of Highway 14 that you could go out to and do some of that stuff. But there's some other things that I think that could be really used out there just for basic amenities. So people don't have to drive all the way to South Fort Collins to go over to a Costco or to some of those bigger locations.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care what goes out there. I don't have a dog in the fight, so to speak. I'm just glad to see that it's not going to be vacant, because what's weird is it was a private owner that had been like, and Alberton still had, if I remember it right, Alberton still is under lease at that building currently. They just it was not profitable for them, or whatever the, you know, the economics behind it were. It's been vacant and unoccupied forever. And so I think having a developing area like North College Avenue with that kind of just hurdle of, we can't even do anything like that because it's just a private owner that's choosing to keep this space essentially unoccupied and vacant, that makes it really difficult for other tenants. Like there's Domino's, right? Like when I ran Old Town Square and shopping centers, you try to see like what tenants and opportunities played off each other. So like if I brought in a women's boutique store, maybe a
Hair salon.
Hair salon would be great for that,
Yep.
because they're going to come in and play off each other. So you try to play with these things, and with that King Supers, and you've got other restaurants and coffee shops, and you've got development going along North College Avenue, and then all of a sudden you have just this space that's extremely, I mean, what was it? I mean, it was 5 or 7 acres.
Yep.
That's just unused, 5-acre site. So regardless, I really don't care what the city does with it. It's going to be a city-owned property, so it's not going to be any type of private user. It's going to be city-owned property that ultimately goes in there. But it'll just be great to see some activity along there that I think will actually spur other activity, other commercial users, other people to then make that investment, because hey, let's just call it a recreation center, is bringing 3,000 people a day through the doors, that is then going to benefit our business, our operation, or we can build these condos here because people want to live close to it. So regardless, I think it's just a really positive thing for that area.
No, I definitely agree.
I'm going to share my screen because I think it's kind of interesting. So there's 7 new laws going into effect in 2025. And honestly, I didn't know a lot about these. I was kind of like I told you now, I was like, did you know distracted driving is coming? Like you can't have, it's a hands-free only phone that you can have. And she's like, no, I didn't know that. When's it coming in effect? And I said, like January 1st. And I was, all right. So there's 7 new laws going into effect in 2025. Let's kind of go through these. I thought this was kind of interesting. One of these days, we'll talk here in depth about U+2, because I think there's some really interesting on the real estate side of things that's going to be changing. But all eggs sold in Colorado must be cage free. I feel like if there was ever a Colorado law, that is it. I'm just like, all right. I mean, I don't know the animal cruelty that I'm sure goes on with a lot of this kind of stuff, but I also know that people sure as heck don't mind going to the store and getting their beef or getting their eggs, not having to go pick the eggs from a chicken coop or slaughter the cow. So it just seems like, if we're not a part of it, we want to make sure that it's done the right way, when the reality is that most people are just like, I just want my eggs. So
yeah. It'll create a little bit extra cost. I mean, you go to the grocery
Sure.
store right now, we got 7 different types of eggs that you can go buy from cage free, from organic, XYZ and stuff. And the cheap ones are the ones that are probably from, the ones that might do some animal cruelty and, caged up. And, out where my parents live, actually, they live by one of the bigger chicken farms out there as well and stuff. It's a cage free area. And, in reality, they're just putting big barns at that point, just all in one big group versus cages. So I don't know what's best. I don't have a dog in that fight. But like you said, I think people are just wanting their food. And, we want to do it correct and right as well. And so I think the biggest thing it's going to do is maybe increase the price of eggs by a little bit, but not enough to be a major factor.
Sure. Okay, here's the big one. Put your phone down while driving in Colorado or face a penalty, which is, I believe, $75. Yeah, $75 and 2 points deducted from your license. I think that 2 points is pretty huge.
Oh, yeah.
And then they get they increase for subsequent offenses. We talked a little bit about last week about like the speed trap zones and things of that nature. I'm seeing more and more flashlights go off, honestly, Connor.
Oh, yeah.
When it's not a red light ticket, it's of people getting a speeding ticket. So I think there's going to be a sharp learning curve for that. But I feel like this, you won't even be able to have your phone out talking like this. Like, it has to be out of your hands. And if you have a phone in your hands, a police officer can, technically pull you over and write you a ticket.
Yep.
I mean, AirPods are going to be a definite important thing for those people who actually have iPhones like a regular human being, comparatively to an Android.
Yep. I was going to say GPSs are going to, start having higher sales now, here in Colorado, because that's how half of us use it. We're sitting on our phones. Most of us, I think, are looking at our GPS, wondering where the heck we're going. And so I wonder how that plays out. Most of our cars are getting to that point where most of us have the screens for GPS to hook up to your phone, XYZ. But I think there is going to be a factor of individuals who are going to have to be a little more sly with it, or get a GPS system and put into their car just to be able to try to abide by that law.
Yeah. Regardless, I think that's a great thing. Ultimately, It's like, if it just saves one accident, one life.
If I can make it through that left-hand turn arrow with everybody else, that'll make me happy. We don't need that front person sitting on their phone for the first 25 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a good thing, but I bet you there's gonna be a lot of people who I didn't know about this.
No, they didn't really post anything other than on small articles.
Yeah, so definitely important to know. It's taking place January 1st. The rules for children in car seats are changing. I've got 3 of them. Luckily, my wife, Janae, is a real smart gal. She pays attention to all this kind of stuff. But essentially, 2 years old or under 40 pounds has to be, I think it's backwards facing, right? To be in a 40. Yes. So if you're under 2 and under 40 pounds, you'll be in a back facing car seat, which I believe is very, very safe. And then up to that point, after you're I think it's like 40 pounds or, above and 2 to 4 years old, there's lots of different things that will take place here. But essentially, rear facing between 2 and 4 years old and under 40 pounds. So I think that's under 2, rear facing, 2 to 4 can be forward facing so long as they're over 40 pounds. Yep. Safety thing, about it. I'm sure there's a lot of statistics and things of that nature that are there. I know it's kind of, it's nice for sure when the kid starts to become forward facing. You can start to reach back and give them things and they can kind of buckle themselves in. But my son Boone, he was probably a forward facing, I don't know, I'm sure it was exactly when he was supposed to be because my wife wouldn't have let me otherwise, but was probably 18 months and, a certain amount of weight, but it's just super nice. But anyways, that is a law. So, all right, moving on. Training will be required to get a concealed carry gun permit. I'm not against that. What are I am not against guns by any means. I've shot my fair share of guns. I know you've shot your fair share and all that good stuff. What are your thoughts on this as far as training will be required to get a concealed carry gun permit?
So I have my concealed carry on that side already. I've gone through the training on that side. That's been something that's been in place for quite some time. I mean, I've done mine through the McKeer group on that side over at Liberty Firearms. I believe it's needed for almost anybody who wants to even get into shooting firearms. Going out and actually taking that class to me is 100% worth it. I believe that other training that should be involved with it as well. Because when I went and did it, it's just going to the shooting range, shooting the gun, making sure that instructor can see you and know that you can operate a gun safely on that side. But when it comes to concealed carry, I mean, the main reason why you're keeping that in with you is the fact that you're going to be out in public. You're going to be out there, in a potential threat. And when you actually have to use it, is me just doing 2 hours at the gun range with an instructor watching me shoot the gun enough to say, hey, that person's capable of handling a situation, being aware of the surroundings behind them, and making sure that when you are going to discharge a firearm, if you're in a bad situation, that you're not going to be putting hopefully anybody else in harm. And so I believe that there needs to be a better standard for getting a concealed carry license, especially if you are going to carry it around in public on that side. So I think there is a balance. I don't think you should have to go take a 6-week course on it, but I also don't believe that the class should only be a 2-day class either on that side. So I think needs to be some boundaries where you got to take a couple classes, just not one. You might go and take the basic one to get your concealed carry, but then before you can conceal carry, going out and actually having it where you do some more operational training, where you go out to a open field and get to practice moving with your gun, firing while pulling it out, trying to make it to where people actually understand how it works, not just by standing still in a booth. I think that's also a very important deal as well. So I think it's important for us to have a little bit more restrictions on that and allow people to feel secure when someone else is out there concealing a gun and having it, knowing that they're not just going to be out there being the old West, slinging guns from their hips. It takes a lot more than that just to be able to handle a gun and manipulate a gun to be able to keep it safe for everybody around you.
Yeah, well, this one's just an 8-hour class. So I don't know if that's enough or what, but
and that's always been what the class was. So I don't know what rule they're changing, because that's always been a rule for any concealed carry. You had to go through a class. And then you also, one other thing I always mention too, is you also want to make sure you have concealed carry insurance as well. Because no matter what, you're going to have issues. I mean, if you can, hopefully you never have issues when you conceal carry and you never have to use the gun. But if you do and stuff, it's good to have insurance that actually backs you up and have a team of lawyers, XYZ, because no matter what, if you end up getting in a conflict like that, more than likely you're going to go to jail. You're going to have to go to court. You're going to have to go through a big process to make sure that it was a justifiable shooting. And so making sure you have all this information. 8 hours, in my opinion, when I took the class, I don't think was even close to enough to justify, someone being able to, conceal carry completely on that side. I think just like motorcycle endorsement, you can go out and take a 2-day class. And I have personally watched multiple people take the class over at Tri-City Cycle. Yeah. And half of them I'm sitting there saying that wasn't enough time for you to go out there and then be on the road on a motorcycle. So I think there's a balance, and it just depends. The 8 hours, it works for now. But I think if you're going to go get your concealed carry, don't just think that 8-hour course is going to be enough for you. Go out and go do the other 3 courses that come behind it that go through and train you further into what it actually means to conceal carry, especially when you get into a predicament where you potentially might have to use it.
All righty. Moving on, continuing with guns. Guns must be stored more securely inside vehicles. Handguns stored inside unoccupied must be in a locked, hard-sided container that is out of plain view. And the vehicle also must be locked. I mean, this kind of just seems like a no-brainer. It's like, let's avoid accidents and not, when my truck got broken into when I was at DIA, the police officers, DIA police officers, they were saying that they just quickly break in to see if there's any guns, jewelry, or money. And, I think, again, luckily I've got a smart wife. I'm the first person to say this, but she's always like, Patrick, you can't leave your iPad on your car seat. You can't leave your wallet out. And I'm like, man, I've grown up in Fort Collins. I've never worried about that kind of stuff. But I think we're in a day and age that people are opportunistic. And I think that just taking these simple precautions are pretty important. So that seems like a no-brainer to me.
No, I agree with you on that. If someone's going to steal something out of your car, they're going to steal something out of your car, in my opinion. I mean, a little lock that is, for your little cabinet on the right-hand side, that does have a lock on it on that side. There's some issues I do have with that personally, because if you're actually ever going to have to use your gun, which again, you hope you never have to on that side, having it locked is one more step to go out and have to unlock it, XYZ. So it makes it a little bit more of a challenge there. But if you're going to leave your car, really do make sure your gun's locked. Make sure your kids can't get to those things. I mean, those are I think that's a no-brainer on that side, but I think there's a balance again between that where, when you need a gun, it's going to be pretty hard. Like if you have a gun in a safe in your closet in your house and people are telling you need to put your gun away because of your kids, well, then it's going to be a lot harder if someone does break into your house. Are you going to be able to remember your code? Are you going to know where your key's at to get into your lock? And so there's some things that go on with that. But overall, I think it's a really good law to have in there just to make sure that we are keeping things safe and hopefully preventing theft a little bit more, especially when leaving stuff in your vehicle.
Cities will be required to allow granny flats taking place in July of 2025. My understanding was actually that you could start doing it earlier than that. But regardless, I actually listened to the planning and zoning. They have another work session in March. So they want to make sure that all of city of Fort Collins laws and ordinances and code are up to date with the state bill. But I think this could be something that we're going to see popping up more and more in the coming years. I think there's going to be people that have the ability to build granny flats, and an ADU is essentially what it is, can be an attached dwelling or a detached dwelling. And there's going to be a lot of rules and regulations that take place. But I mean, this is going to be, I think, pretty substantive as far as a change across Colorado for how people can use their properties.
And one question I had for you on that, Pat, is, I haven't kept up with it nearly as much as maybe you have, but I know one of the big things that came up when ADUs and being able to put extra property on a lot and stuff, we talked about that. I think it started last year. And so one of the big things that came up was like HOA covenants and stuff like that. Do you know if this law or anything is going to be able to be above HOA covenants? So someone who lives in an HOA, they could put an ADU in still. I just don't know on that side.
Yeah, it will supersede those laws, but the HOA can still have architectural guidelines. It can't be restrictive to where the rules are such that you almost can't build that ADU.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's, I live in a neighborhood with an HOA and I've got a little back corner of my property that I'm like, man, that would be a great little spot. But I'm like, what's interesting too is here's probably the most interesting thing about the ADUs is the ADU law to build an ADU, the city or the municipality can't require an additional parking space for that ADU to be approved.
Okay.
Which I feel like is that there's gonna be issues like there is with everything, and hopefully they get figured out and sorted out. But I was thinking about like my house. Well, I like having my 3-car garage for me, and I'm gonna have 3 kids, and I'm thinking, all right, when they turn 15, 16, 17 years old, and they each have a car, and let's say I do build that ADU, and it's a couple. I mean, that's potential for my wife, myself, maybe 2 cars, my kids. And this ADU that has 2, so I have 6 cars outside my house, and I'm just like, man, there's gonna, I'm sure that this is far enough down the road that they'll make some change or make some adjustments, but excited to see this. I know I've got a really very good friend who's extremely pro housing, excited about the ADUs. Let's see here. Yeah, ADUs can be good if they just have to have some type of oversight with it. In my parents' neighborhood, people will build ADUs right up to the fence, and it causes such a mess and obstructs views. And that's something that I hope, you feel like that people need to be good stewards of their home, because in that back corner of my property that I'm talking about, I'm thinking, okay, if like in my mind, I build this up, well, her garden's right there, and like the sun goes over, I'm like, her garden's gone.
Yep.
You know, I'm like, and I'm not, I really have zero intention of doing this ADU at this point, but hey, like, listen, if my mom all of a sudden needed a place, or my in-laws, and like, that's an affordable way that I could potentially like house her for her later years in life, like that would be an option for me, and I would absolutely consider it, but it would come at the expense of my neighbor's garden, and I would do everything in a very tasteful way. But man, there's going to be some neighborly disputes, but I agree. There hopefully can become some oversight, and but it'll like with anything with the government, you know, it's going to take time. Whereas this was passed last May, but it comes into effect July of 2025. You know, so any types of changes, anybody who gets that application in and starts that process, and there's a shovel in the ground, well, they're playing by the original laws and original rules, which might be a little bit more lax than rules 2, 3, 4 years down the road.
Yep.
So it's exciting. You know, I think it's change. It's people's properties. The valuation of people's properties will differ when this goes in. But I also think because of the cost of construction, materials, and how much this will actually cost to build, I'm sure that the amount of people who can actually build ADUs will be, unless there's financial incentives, support, lots of different streamlined processes that decreases the price pretty significantly.
Yep.
Minimum wage increasing, man, I think it's kind of a nothing burger. It went up 2.7% increase. We had huge increases over the last years, you know, basically from 2016 to 2020, that's kind of our big increase from $8 to $12. You know, shoot, I remember when I was working, that's right when I graduated high school, and in 2007, when I was working for my dad in the warehouse when I was like 13, I think I was like making like $5.50, you know, an hour, and just working like not crazy hours, but working a lot of hours during the summer. And now I'm like, for that same job that I'd be doing, I'd get paid $14 an hour, which is crazy. But
oh yeah, I was gonna say, even at Panda Express right now over in Fort Collins, they always have a sign up there for dishwashers for $18 an hour, and it's just like, man, I was slinging sandwiches at Jimmy John's for, you know, $6.25 and stuff, and so it's just like, man, I could have been rich back in those days. But again, inflation XYZ comes in, and you know, it does add in and changes actually what that dollar value is worth.
100%. Yeah, it'd have been fun to see this line kind of overlaid with what inflation's been, you know, or maybe what the cost of, I don't know, 20 gallons of gas, you know, what is the cost of gas versus here type of deal. Something to show inflation versus this wage. And then finally, Fort Collins rental properties will need to be registered for January 1st. We registered all of our rental properties. It was a little cumbersome, but not too bad. $37 per rental unit, and then $10 per rental property, and $10 per unit on top of that, annualized. So, and really, I would say this isn't going to be come into like really into effect until January 2026, because they're going to give a year's grace period for these people to figure it out. A lot of individual investor owners who won't know that they need to, you know, register the rentals. But so really nothing to worry about for the first year, except I will say, you know, we're talking about rental renewal rates with some of our tenants, and this is probably just one of those things that it's not helping costs and expenses when you have property taxes increasing, insurance increasing, cost of furnaces and HVAC, and now you have a rental registration. You know, we will look at those, and we really like to maintain good relations with our renewal tenants, so we never increase what we need to. But when that property comes back on the market, we have a property right now, Connor, that we've kept the rental rate at about $2,300 per month. It's like a 4-bed, 3-bath house, and we've kept it there for like 3 years because they've just been great tenants, right at the exact same rent. And now when they move out, that rent's going to increase to about $3,000 a month. And you know, and that's what market is. And so we've not, I don't think we've been losing money on that property by any means, but we haven't been keeping up with what our increased costs have been over the last 3 years. So it's kind of a way for us to catch up for that over the last 3 years. But that is ultimately what market is. And I think that a lot of landlords will see this and just be like, okay, automatically increasing rent by $37 per year per unit, whatever.
Yep.
But let's see here. A couple or question in here. Also, does building an ADU trigger a reassessment in Colorado? Oh, interesting. That's a great question, Alex. Your property value will definitely increase. That's for sure.
Yep.
Building on that ADU, I don't believe it would be adjusted during. It would be adjusted in our 2-year cycle, but I don't believe it would be adjusted during live and like in real time. I guess is the best way to put it. But yes, after those 2 years, you're going to be submitting for permits, and so those are going to be reflected on your property taxes for sure. But that I'm not positive on that answer, Alex. But I don't believe so, because I'm thinking about myself. I'm thinking about when I do I did our basement remodel and things of that nature. It didn't trigger a reassessment that I know of, at least. And if it did, it was so minimal that I couldn't tell. But I'm just going based off of other, like when I did a massive remodel at our Riverside property, it kept at that value for basically the 2 years until they did the reassessment. So I think it will ultimately cause a reassessment during the cycle, but not in real time.
No, and that's the same when I did my basement as well on that side, is that once we got all the permitting done, we got all the work done, once we hit that next cycle of 2 years for reassessment, that's when it got added in, and the bedrooms got added in, the bathrooms got added in. And so I'm pretty sure that's going to be how they're going to probably do it with ADUs as well.
Yeah. All right, let's jump in. Okay, so there was 3 salaries. So that, like I was talking about earlier, City of Fort Collins City Council has 3 employees that are direct reports to them: the city manager, city chief judge, and city attorney. Let's see how close you pay attention to salaries, Connor. What do you think the 2025 salary for, we'll start with the city chief judge is?
Ooh, city chief judge. I would say the city chief judge has to be making probably $250,000 or above would be my guess.
Not bad, not bad.
Just based off of my thoughts. Just, I'm thinking, how our big government works and just kind of keeping it in relative perspective to that.
Well, their job's not getting any easier with the population growth. And so, their workload's definitely increasing. It was crazy. Like I said, when I ran a lot of commercial properties for a long time, and one of our tenants was the public defender. Public defender was one of our tenants in one of our commercial buildings. And they took up, when I started working there was just they took up one level. It was the second story of this building, Building 1 in Old Town Square. They just took up the second level. During my time working there, they took the third level. So they had the second and third level. And after I left Old Town, they had booted Old Town Square properties out and took over the entire building. So it just kind of goes to show, more money, more problems type of deal. More people, more problems. But yeah, their city chief judge, $218,141 represents a 9% increase versus last year.
Okay.
City attorney, what do you think city attorneys compensation is?
I'd put city attorney, like 160,000, 170,000 would be my guess.
Oh no, more than the city chief judge, $265,369.
Okay.
A 10.3% increase versus last year. And a lot of these salaries for these individuals, come through based off of comparative regional partners, competitiveness. Like they definitely don't want to go out. Our CFO, Travis Storm, he's been with the city, took another job opportunity, I think, with a power company out in Brighton area. And very excited for him. Going to do quite well. But, it is a retention type job, and how do we keep these people? So that was what they believed was going to be the most competitive. Okay, and our final, and I've progressed a little bit, so I'm giving you a little bit of a hint here on our final salary that we'll be discussing is. Oh, you there?
No, there we go. Now I got you back.
That's me. My internet's a little bit weak right now for whatever reason. Gone. Connor.
No, I got you. I can hear you. Your video just went dead. No, we might have lost him. Okay, looks like Patrick ended up getting kicked off the channel. It's now Connor Martin's channel. But anyways, we'll see if he pops on here in just a sec. But I'm guessing he was probably going after the city manager is who I'm guessing he was talking about on that side. And I cheated already and looked that one up on that end. The city manager makes $305,000 a year on that end. And so just like he was saying, retention is a big part of it. You know, they want to keep these guys in for a long time. It's hard to keep individuals at the same job for extended period of time to where they can actually make things happen. And so being able to actually have individuals who make this money and manage our complete city here in Fort Collins is a huge job. It takes a lot of manpower, a lot of time, a lot of energy. I know it sucks away a lot of time from their families, and they have to be engaged with the community a lot more. And so having it set up where these individuals are getting paid what they're worth on that side, as long as they continue to make the city of Fort Collins amazing like they have, and continue to keep diving into it on that side. Well, I'm not sure if Patrick's going to make it back on that end. I don't even know if I'm still even on live, but looks like I am. So just wanted to give you guys a heads up. Really appreciate you guys listening to this video and hearing what the city of Fort Collins and what Colorado has going on here coming 2024. If you guys ever have any questions, feel free to reach out. And if you guys can, please always like, subscribe these videos. All right, guys. Well, hope you have a great one, and we will catch you next time.